Try that again, shall we? Right. Okay, so if everybody just could mute. You okay? Should we try again? Yeah, okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Gwent Police and Crime Panel on Friday, the 28th of January. This one. Do you want me to?
On your left, to go into sound.
Taken.
Sound, and then put it right down.
Oh, yeah.
That's where your sound is.
We don't need this stuff, do we?
How do I?
Like. Is it that one there? The little one? No, yeah. So put that right down to the bottom.
Okay. Do we want the microphones on these ones?
No,
Leave them off unless you're struggling. Okay. All right, then we'll try take 3. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Gwent Police and Crime Panel on Friday, the 28th of January at 10 a.m. at Penalta House in Caerphilly. Okay, so we'll try with the microphone on, yeah?
Please need to put the speaker on in order to hear.
You've got to have yours on because otherwise you can't hear it on your headphones.
Your speaker's on.
Because you've used the speaker
on.
It's not coming. You know when Kath was over by your laptop, it was coming on, going off, what was coming through?
Speak now, Jenny.
Okay. Is it working now? Do you want to pop your headphones on? Is it coming through now? I'm unmuted. Got my speakers on.
It's a speaker, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Mark will help you with that a sec and we'll carry on.
We're not listening on you, see, we're listening to the room. You were only one listening to Teams.
Ah.
Switch on.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Mark will sort that. We'll carry on with the meeting. Oh, I can do the minute silence, wouldn't I? So shall I wait a minute?
Yes.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Thank you for your confirmation, guys. Just bear with us 1 second. We're good? Right, okay, sorry for technical problems. We'll continue with the meeting. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the meeting. Unfortunately, okay, I think we're going to have to carry on a second, do we?
Yeah, we'll have to. Yeah.
Right, okay. Okay. So unfortunately, it's with sadness I have to tell the panel that actually one of our members, a very long-standing member and a colleague and friend of a lot of us here today, has passed away. Councillor Peter Clark passed away on the 10th of January, sadly. We will certainly miss him on the panel. He was certainly a great help to me when I first joined the panel, and a very good friend to all of us here. So we'd like to share our condolences to Jan and his family, and we'd like to just take a moment's silence, please, if everybody could, just to recognise his contributions and for his family. Thank you. Thank you very much. So God bless Peter, sleep tight. And if anybody would like to make a donation to St David's Foundation in his memory, I'm happy to collect any donations, and so is Colin, because Colin's actually attending the funeral tomorrow. So thank you for that. Okay, moving on then, we'll start the meeting. We'll start with some introductions. We'll start to my left. I'm Jill Howells. I'm the chair and independent member of the panel, and I'll go to my left.
Colin.
Pam Kelly, Chief Constable of Gwent Police.
Jeff Councillor.
Larry Thomas, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Sean Curley, Chief Executive to the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Councillor Thompson, lead officer to the panel.
Mark Jakes, Scrutiny Officer, Caerphilly County Borough Council.
Thank you all. So for the purposes of the meeting, if we could make sure that we turn the mic on Teams, the mute, use the mute button, so on when we're speaking and off when we're not. There seems to be some audio problems with it dropping in and out a little bit. So if we can make sure that the mic is on Teams, and if we do have a problem, we can use the mics in the room, but preferably just the Teams mic. If anybody has any problems, just say as we go along. Moving on to the first item on the agenda, declarations of interest. Do you have any declarations of interest for the items on the agenda today, or new items? No? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Kath?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Chris Forehead and Councillor Clive Meredith.
Thank you. Moving on to the agenda item 3, which is the minutes from the Gwent Police and Crime panel held on the 10th of December. We'll go through page by page. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Do we have anybody to move the minutes as an accurate record of the meeting? Thank you, Peter. Seconded. All in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 4, which is to receive and answer any questions to the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent. There's one question that's been put to the Commissioner for today. The question being, in light of a recent news article about police officer conduct and the BBC article dated the 16th of November, police vetting thousands of staff members not properly checked on the BBC News, please can the Commissioner advise the panel on what assurances he has received that the extent and the status of officer and staff vetting in Gwent Police is up to date and in place for all staff, and B, that any complaints or intelligence received about officers and staff is taken seriously throughout the organisation to ensure any potentially inappropriate behaviour is dealt with. Thank you, Commissioner.
Come on. There we are. I should know this by now, shouldn't I? Right. Thank you very much for the question, Chair. Can I, before I begin the question, thank you personally and many members of this panel for the messages of recuperation and best wishes that they sent me during my illnesses that I had last year. I hope very much now that they are behind me and that 2022 is a better year for all of us for a range of reasons. Thank you for the question. Although this is an area that we monitor closely on an ongoing basis, this area of work has been a particular focus for me in recent months. I can provide you with an absolute assurance that vetting in Gwent Police is up to date, bar a single individual who is on long-term sick, and that any complaints and/or intelligence are taken very seriously throughout the organisation and my office. That reassurance is backed up through my regular meetings with Captain Evans, the IOPC Director for Wales, the Independent Office of Police Conduct, who has given us very positive feedback about the way in which these matters are dealt with. Now, there is more detail that we can provide to evidence this work, and so with your permission, Chair, I will ask Sian Curley, my Chief Executive, to give an update, as this is a matter on which she leads on my behalf.
Thank you, Commissioner. On the issue of vetting, we do receive quarterly updates from the professional staff. And I'm very reassured that this area has seen significant improvements over recent years. Specific investment was made a few years back by increasing resources into the vetting department so that we could be absolutely assured that the vetting for officers and staff was up to date. As well as vetting individuals when they join Gwent Police and the OPCC, all staff have annual health checks of their vetting to clarify whether any circumstances have changed over the previous year. All staff are vetted by Gwent Police, and many staff also have an additional layer of vetting that's carried out by the Home Office. We also now, the vetting department, also undertakes additional checks when people change roles or if they're promoted, so that there's another layer of reassurance. And that additional resource has allowed for things like vetting interviews to happen so that any decisions can be more informed. Another positive initiative that the force has taken over the last 2 years has been a more transparent vetting panel that's made up from officers and staff from different departments and includes the Commissioner's Head of Assurance and Compliance. And that panel considers any appeals by anyone who's refused vetting. And we've also jointly made a decision that there will be automatic consideration of a vetting appeal if somebody has a protected characteristic under the Equality Act. In relation to the question about complaints, as well as that quarterly report that I mentioned that gives us reassurance around performance, I meet with the head of PSD on a monthly basis to discuss complaints and conduct matters. And our office does regular dip sampling of force complaints to ensure they've met regulatory requirements. As we've previously spoken about in this meeting, since February 2020, the Commissioner's Office has been responsible for dealing with reviews of police complaints, and that helps to give us confidence that those complaints are dealt with seriously and reasonably and proportionately as well. And where we have made recommendations for improvement to the force, they've been very receptive and quick to make changes when we've done that, and further liaise with complainants when we've asked for that to be the case. There's been a particular piece of work in recent months within Gwent Police that we're closely aligned to in relation to tackling abuse of position and trust. The Deputy Commissioner and I attend the weekly Gold Group, which focuses on abuse of position of trust and violence against women and girls. And this has resulted in individual conversations by supervisors with all staff and officers within Gwent Police and the OPCC about this matter, not just to be absolutely clear that we don't tolerate inappropriate behaviour, but also our expectation that it should be called out if witnessed by others. And, you know, if anybody is unsure about making any complaint, we will work with them, and they can rely on us that we will support them through making any complaint as well. We did speak last time about the Not in My Force initiative and Safe Call, the confidential reporting line, which gives another option for people to use. And the Deputy Commissioner also co-chairs an All Wales task force on targeting violence against women and girls. And this work includes addressing inappropriate workforce behaviours, which we know can potentially lead to more serious incidents. So that's just a brief summary of this area of work, and we'd also welcome the opportunity, if panel members would appreciate it, to give you a more detailed briefing in future as well.
Thank you for that, both. It is really interesting, and some of the focus of that was obviously on complainants, some of which may not be internal staff. So it's the assurance that the people within the force as well, so not just the external complainants, but people within the force are encouraged where, you know, they do see inappropriate behaviour between them and with the colleagues, also have the opportunity to come through, and that it's then taken seriously by managers, because we can put all the policies we want in the world. It's having the people to have the confidence, as you say, to come forward. So that safe call, is that for employees as well as for members of the public, or?
Employees. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you for those assurances. Does any panel members need questions relating to that? No? Thank you very much. Moving on then to the highlight of today's meeting, the one thing that we're all here for. We obviously had Chief Constable's very interesting, very passionate presentation at the last meeting about the force and its operational needs and what it needs to go forward. So we have on the agenda today now agenda item number 5, which is the Police and Crime Commissioners for Gwent's budget requirement and council tax precept proposal for 2022-23. So I'll hand over to you, Commissioner, on this one.
My microphone is off. It's okay. I trust everyone can hear me. Right, thank you. I propose to you today a Band D council tax precept increase of 5% for 22-23, which equates to an additional £1.20 per month or £14.40 a year for the average Band D household in Gwent. This council tax precept proposal, however, revises that requested by the Chief Constable down from 6.82% to 5% for the 22-23 financial year only. The rationale for this I will discuss later. This revised proposal reduces overall 22-23 council tax precept income by nearly £1.2 million from that planned before the receipt of the provisional settlement and the request within the Chief Constable's budget bid. Nevertheless, this level of council tax precept increase will, over the short term, maintain previous investment in around 170 additional police officer numbers since 2016, and therefore maintain the overall levels of police officer and police staff on the establishment before the uplift programme and Welsh Government PCSO funding is taken into account. It will contribute to an investment of an additional 10 PCSOs in 22-23 and maintain their base establishment and therefore minimise any impact on frontline service delivery. This council tax precept increase therefore directly benefits the public of Gwent by protecting police officer, police staff members and PCSO numbers. Anything less than my £14.40 or 5% increase proposal jeopardises the Chief Constable's ability to protect and reassure the public of Gwent, particularly the most vulnerable, and make Gwent a safer place to live, work and visit. Importantly, however, this proposed level of council tax precept does not set a balanced budget in 22-23, even after taking account of over £1.2 million of cashable efficiency schemes and budget reductions. The remaining recurrent shortfall in 22-23 of over £2.5 million will need to be risk managed during the 22-23 financial year, necessitate extensive further cashable efficiencies to be delivered by the force, or be met by a contribution from my reserves and committed funds. Furthermore, the reduced 5% level of council tax precept proposed places a further burden on future borrowing in order to fund the estate strategy within the current capital programme, and therefore heightens the risk of exposure to negative fluctuations in interest rates. Now, I am extremely thankful to the panel's estate reference group, who have met 3 times during 2021 and have been briefed on the overarching estate strategy, including the rationale for the phases of implementation and the locations identified. However, In light of future significant borrowing required to deliver the next phase of the estate strategy, a review of the estate strategy will be undertaken at the commencement of the next financial year in collaboration with the panel's estate reference group and other key stakeholders in order to realign operational policing and the public's requirements, incorporating both the principles of value for money and environmental sustainability with an appropriate risk-based approach to funding. To be clear, the level of precept I propose for 22-23 therefore only contributes to the capital funding of short-life assets such as ICT and fleet, and not the longer-term estate strategy. The future external borrowing identified is designed to solely fund the estate element of my capital programme and can be flexed accordingly dependent upon this review. I therefore look to you today to support the Chief Constable and Gwent Police at this crucial time. Now, the details of my council tax precept proposal is contained in your papers today, but I would like to take this opportunity to draw out some particular pertinent points. First of all, from a governance perspective, just to recap, the Chief's budget bid was formally received and scrutinised at my Strategy and Performance Board on the 29th of November 21. The detailed discussion which took place confirmed that the bid was robust, compelling and justified. You had the opportunity in the December 21 panel meeting to have sight of the Chief Constable's bid and receive a presentation from her on her plans for the force to continue to improve performance whilst delivering my police and crime plan, the government's beating crime plan and the Policing Vision 2025, all to the backdrop of financial uncertainty from COVID-19 and Brexit, increasing unavoidable service pressures, policing more complex crime types and policing in the digital age. Now, I am extremely grateful to the panel's finance subgroup who have met 3 times in order to scrutinise the detail of my budget report and council tax precept proposal and discuss more specifically the findings of my capital programme and the impact of differing precept scenarios. I would also like to highlight the results of my public engagement exercise. My office ran an engagement exercise regarding the proposed council tax precept increase from the 18th of October to the 9th of January this year. This was a total of 12 weeks compared to 9 weeks for the equivalent exercise last year. Following the 12 weeks exercise in which the question asked was, would you support the principle of increasing the police part of the council tax by up to £2 a month, based on a Band D property for 22-23 to maintain policing at current levels? The findings were 1,697 residents of Gwent completed the survey, resulting in a 99% confidence that the results were within a -4% to +4% margin of error. 44% of those surveyed supported the increase. 38% of those surveyed did not support the increase. 15.6% of those surveyed were unsure, and 2% of those surveyed just didn't answer that question. So you'll note from that, and for the first time, that we did not achieve a 50% satisfaction for the proposed increase. It's important to note, however, that residents overwhelmingly supported the work of Gwent Police, with less than 10% stating that they did not. The budget question saw a no response of just over 38% of respondents, however, which emphasises the issue of affordability for many people. Now, looking at funding. The findings of the Comprehensive Spending Review 2021 were announced in October of that year. The CSR's key points for the policing service are: police and crime commissioners in England would be able to raise their council tax precept by up to £10 for Band D property. The government remains committed to the final 8,000 Operation Uplift police officers to be recruited during 22-23. This will be funded by further investment of £540 million across England and Wales during the CSR period. The government will provide an additional £60 million in 22-23 for crime reductions, drug misuse, money laundering and fraud programmes, which commissioners will most likely need to bid for. The public sector pay freeze will end in 2022. There will be a 1.25% increase in employer national insurance contributions from April 2022, ring-fenced for the benefit of health and social care and related government departments. Sorry, beg your pardon, related ring-fenced for health and social care. Now, I know there's talk, including today, of the NI increases being postponed, if not cancelled. Darren, certainly at the end, will be able to clarify what the impact would be if that was to come about. But at the moment, those NI increases are still there. Related government departments, such as the Ministry of Justice, will be receiving funding to ensure that the investment in police officers is effective by increasing capacity, removing blockages and backlogs in the wider criminal justice system, and supporting victims and prison leavers. Now, following the CSR of 21, the provisional settlement was received on the 16th of December, the week after the December panel meeting. From a central government grant perspective, I can now confirm that the provisional settlement provided me with 5.2 million of extra central government grant funding. However, this increase is exclusively written off to fund the long-term costs of the final tranche of the 82 uplift police officers and the 1.25% increase in employer national insurance contributions. 1.4 million of this funding will be held back and released only when recruitment targets are being met. Of the 82 new police officers, 78 will go into frontline Gwent police roles and 4 into the regional organised crime unit Tarian. Following the revaluation of public sector pension schemes in 2016, my pension grant remains flat cash at 2019-20 levels. This results in a 2.5 million shortfall for 22-23 that I need to pick up locally. My historic capital grant, which was only £120,000 from the Home Office, has ceased. Next year's fleet programme alone amounts to £2.5 million, placing increasing pressure on revenue budgets, my reserves and committed funds, and external borrowing. And just to rub salt into the wound, the Metropolitan Police Service and the City of London Police will continue to receive national and international capital city grant funding worth over £190 million in recognition of the additional demands of policing the capital city of the United Kingdom. No such allocation is provided in recognition of Cardiff's status as the capital city of Wales and the associated events held there that draw resources from South Wales Police and its neighbouring forces, which of course includes Gwent Police. Now, from an England and Wales perspective, the provisional settlement also confirmed top sliced budgets being retained by the Home Office of nearly £1.4 billion. These equate to a potential loss of nearly £14 million of central government grant funding into Gwent. A recognition by the Minister of the immense work undertaken by forces in response to COVID-19. The Home Office's asks in return for the investment contained in the provisional settlement, which are that forces recruit the additional 8,000 police officers by the end of 22-23, forces accelerate progress on the government's key policing priorities of reducing crime, ensuring the criminal justice system works for all, driving forward improvements in the service the public receive, and transforming critical capabilities and infrastructure. Also, that forces continue to increase productivity using enhanced technology, better data sharing and use of investigative tools, become more efficient and effective with police officers' time, and deliver £80 million of cashable efficiencies during 22-23, rising to £100 million the following financial year. Conversely, the provisional settlement did not confirm the following outstanding issues and risks, which remain unclear at this time and are therefore subject to further dialogue. Firstly, the impact of changes that the Home Office wished to make to the funding formula used to allocate government funding to individual forces. This could see, in addition to only cost-neutral settlements moving forward, a £6 million reduction in central government grant funding into Gwent from 24-25 onwards. Secondly, the basis for the calculation of compensation for Welsh forces not able to utilise their apprenticeship levy contributions in recent years. This compensation totals £2.4 million in 22-23, and which the Home Office stated will address this issue in full. However, this is significantly short of the £6.7 million gross costs of the apprenticeship levy plus administering the Police Education and Qualifications Framework, PQF, in Wales. Thirdly, the process to access specific funding promises in the CSR 21 announcements, such as the £60 million pot announced for crime and other initiatives. Lastly, the assurance of the continuation and amounts of a number of specific government grant funding streams, such as victim services funded from the Ministry of Justice. Now, my council tax precept proposal today significantly reduces the increase asked for from 6.82% down to 5% and is driven by the following factors. Number one, the provisional settlement confirms that the entire increase in central government grant funding in 22-23 is ring-fenced specifically for delivering a set number of new police officer posts and their associated consequential costs on a future-proof basis and meets the local requirements to fund an additional 1.25% of employer national insurance contributions. However, the central government grant funding for uplift in the short term provides a non-recurrent revenue contribution to capital to fund both short-term and long-term assets, but does not remedy the need for sustainable funding for the capital programme. Number two, there is an expectation from government, as I've already said, for police and crime commissioners to maximise council tax precept increases to £10 per annum in England to invest in the policing service and complement the uplift programme. The equivalent council tax precept from a Welsh perspective at the capping referendum limit is 5%. Number three, an increase of 5% better reflects the results of my public engagement exercise. Number four, similar to number three, early positive engagement with your finance reference group reconfirmed the public's view that although they are exceptionally supportive of Gwent Police, the stark reality of the economic factors beyond policing, such as unprecedented rise in utility costs and inflation growth on fuel and more general commodities, places an unaffordable ask at the feet of Gwent council tax precept payers. And number five, with the previous four factors acknowledged, however, although the provisional settlement has been more positive than expected for the policing service in the short term, it must be acknowledged that the provisional settlement has only confirmed the funding for the first year of CSR 21. Therefore, until the full economic impact of COVID-19 and Brexit are known, funding in years 2 and 3 of the CSR could be more punitive as the Office of Budget Responsibility forecasts are revised. To this end, the future council tax precept increases within our plans could revert back to 6.82% from 23-24 due to the uncertainty of the funding position. However, even reverting back to 6.82% from 23-24 onwards does not remedy the forecast recurrent deficit of £9.8 million by 26-27. It must be emphasised, however, that this reduced council tax precept proposal in no way undermines the integrity, robustness and justification of the Chief Constable's bid. Instead, it is simply a case of having to risk manage the policing budget over the short term in order to provide an affordable increase to support policing on the householders of Gwent. Now, focusing on some expenditure requirements. You will note in your papers the significant unavoidable financial pressures that we are facing, particularly around the national insurance increase, significant inflation and future pay awards above our planning assumptions. We are aiming to maintain an establishment of 1,506 police officers, 820 police staff and 172 PCSOs for 22-23. Furthermore, you will see financial asks for enabling functions and ICT infrastructure to support the significant investment in new police officers and to embrace new, smarter ways of working. Of note, it is also the establishment of a recurrent budget to deliver our environmental sustainability strategy and further budgets to put the funding of the capital programme to support this and the uplift programme onto a recurrent funded footing. In the heart of these unavoidable pressures, however, is the recruitment of an additional 10 PCSOs into Gwent Police in 22-23 on top of the 10 recruited in this current financial year. It is the Chief Constable's and my ambition to recruit 44 force-funded PCSOs by 24-25. When these are added to the existing force-funded PCSOs and the 121 Welsh Government-funded PCSOs, Gwent Police will have 196 PCSOs serving the public of Gwent. Although the marginal changes in expenditure budgets are shown from the totality of the resources which I provide to the Chief Constable, which would be the vast majority of my total and revenue expenditure of 156 million, she will continue to build upon the successes in her 21-22 delivery plan, improve force performance and improve the quality of service, maximise returns on investment and deliver efficiencies and benefits to the people of Gwent, invest in the well-being of her officers and staff, manage demand and successfully work with partners and plan for the future, including delivery against the 6 strands of the Policing Vision 2025. Also, just taking into account a few external influences. On current financial forecasts, by 25-26, council taxpayers in Gwent will fund over half of the net budget in Gwent, thereby becoming the majority stakeholders. Modern policing demand is increasingly addressed through non-visible policing presence, such as dealing with cybercrime, counter-terrorism and domestic extremism work, safeguarding work with vulnerable people, dealing with domestic violence and tackling child sexual exploitation and modern slavery. Furthermore, from a local perspective, my proposed increase of an additional £14.40 per annum for a Band D property would equate to only a 1.03% rise in the average Gwent local authority Band D precept. Or put another way, a 5% increase on the average local authority Band D precept in Gwent would add nearly £71 per annum to a household's bill, as opposed to the £14.40 per annum my 5% increase would add, i.e. 5 times the value for the same percentage increase. Now, just to consider some financial risks and opportunities. At this stage in the budget round, my budget report presented today has already highlighted that policing in Gwent is still faced with a number of risks. They are the economic impact of COVID-19 on the UK and public finances, in particular, both from government and local council tax collection rates. Brexit's impact on the economy, impacting future inflation and the costs of borrowing. Years 2 and 3 of CSR 2021 and the sustainability of the police officer uplift programme. Changes to the funding formula. Additional Home Office reallocations or top slices from commissioners' budgets to fund national policing work, which is happening at this moment in terms of special branch and counter-terrorism. Increasing running costs of national ICT programmes of work. Legislative and policy changes having unintended consequences, e.g. as previously seen with the revaluation of public sector pensions, the apprenticeship levy and the NI increase. Continuation of Welsh Government funded initiatives such as Pcsos and school liaison, and increased borrowing costs as reserves and committed funds become depleted during 22-23. On the plus side, however, opportunities can be advanced in relation to adopting and embedding the new ways of working arising from the lessons learnt from COVID-19, co-commissioning services with partners, collaborative opportunities with other police forces, and legislative changes to give commissioners greater power to income generate. So, Chair, you'll be pleased to hear my concluding remarks. My precept increase of 5% or £14.40 a year or £1.20 a month will partly fund the underlying pre-operation uplift police officer and police staff establishment, the existing 41 force funded PCSOs plus an additional 10 in this coming financial year, and the unavoidable non-pay service pressures and costs, particularly inflation, capital spend and ICT running costs to boost productivity. I say partly fund because even after this proposed 5% precept uplift, I am left with an unbalanced budget next year of £2.5 million. You must note that policing annual precept percentage increases are, as mentioned, not comparable with those of Gwent local authorities. In addition, on average, Gwent local authorities had a 9.5% increase from the Welsh Government in grant funding for 22-23. Welsh policing's average UK government grant increase was around 6%, all of which was ring-fenced or already committed. You have heard my justification today and read the detailed report from my office. I therefore urge you to support the invaluable public service that policing provides to the people of Gwent, usually at times when they are at their most vulnerable, and I put my proposal before you. In terms of questions, I will happily take those, but most of them will probably be deferred to my Chief Finance Officer, Darren Garwood, for a more technical response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing the summary, the comprehensive report we've received and the appendices we also received. So thank you and your officers for that. We do have some questions for you, and surprisingly, of course. Councillor Mann, would you like to start with your questions first? You had a couple of questions you wanted to raise.
Thank you, Commissioner, for the...
Can you unmute on Teams?
Sorry. So worried about the technicalities, I didn't look at the obvious. Sorry, folks. Thank you, Commissioner, for your comprehensive presentation. Obviously, we have a very long report. I think Darren tells us he uses it as a reference book. I'm not quite sure to be afraid of that or pleased, but there we are. There is, I think it's very welcome that you have been able to reduce your proposed increase from 6.82 to 5%. It is still a lot of money when you think of the pressures that people are facing, and we're all very much aware of it, the energy bills, the rising cost of food and everything else. And I think it's fair to say that, in fact, I've had this on good authority, that one of the most frequent inquiries to the likes of Citizens Advice is people who have problems with council tax bills. It is one of the biggest bill on a monthly basis, as we all know, especially people aren't paying a mortgage or haven't got a car loan or whatever. And it is one of the things that does really concern people. I think it is quite possible that the desire of the panel would be that the increase was less, and we'll obviously discuss that as a panel a little bit later on. And I think one of the things you did mention, the capital programme, one of the things that I think we do need to look at, and it is in the paper, is that we will be looking again at the capital programme as soon as possible, maybe next month, because the figures in the report, and it's on Appendix 8A. We're looking at revenue contribution to capital of something like 44 million in the next few years, and the funding from external borrowing is going to cost us something like 50 million pounds. That's not chicken feed in anyone's terms. So I think that is something that it's only fair to the panel and to the public and yourself that is looked at again, because it is a huge amount of money. None of us, I think, wants to reduce the number of officers on the street. Those of us who are councillors often get complaints that they don't see one very often. And even 10 extra officers spread across Gwent, of course, is quite a thin line. I'm not quite sure how many wards there are in Gwent. There's certainly maybe in the region of 150 actual council wards. So it's not difficult to work out how far 10 officers go. But any increase is very welcome, of course. Could I just end with a specific? You mentioned the possible national insurance increase, and we may well know in the next couple of days or so whether or not it's going to happen. And this is probably one for Darren. Maybe Darren could explain to the panel exactly what difference it would make if that increase didn't actually come in.
Thank you very much. Shall I respond, Chair, directly now? Right, thank you. I will bring in Darren as well to deal with some of the more technical points there, and particularly about the impact of the national insurance contribution. My understanding at the moment is that if that was to happen, it would simply be pulled back from us, any additional monies. So there'll probably be no benefit, but I will ask Darren to comment with more accuracy on that. You do make some very fair points, and look, we understand absolutely. Everyone in this room, members of my office, all police officers also are impacted by the cost of living rises. The Gwent Police itself will have to meet increased costs for utilities and fuel. So it's a no-win situation in that regard. And as I mentioned in my contribution, there is no doubt that this cost of living increase is the biggest single reason as to why we failed to achieve a 50% plus rate in approval for our proposed increase, which, by the way, as I mentioned, was £2 per month. So we can come down considerably from that. In terms of, you mentioned the issue of police officer numbers, and you won't be surprised to hear both Sean Curley and I, we had a briefing with Blaenau Gwent councillors yesterday, went through a lot of issues. I met with Bryn Mawr Town Council last week, and the issue of officer visibility came up. It always does, and I fully understand that. The reality, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, is that the nature of policing is changing fundamentally, and therefore we do have to manage people's expectations in terms of the numbers of police officers they will actually see on the street, because crime is very often elsewhere now. But that's not to underestimate in any way the importance of providing reassurance to people, and we will, and I know that the Chief will agree with me, do all that we can to build and increase neighbourhood policing teams. And probably the single most important driving factor for me is to make sure that whatever the precept is, it is adequate to meet our plans for retaining and increasing our staffing complement, both police officers, PCSOs and other staff. So that is why it's set as it is. With your permission, Chair, I'll ask Darren perhaps to comment a little more, especially on the issue of contributions to capital and any other comments he's got on the NI increase issue.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Councillor Mann. Yeah, I think I'll touch on 3 points. The first one, we absolutely understand what you're saying around the affordability precept on house in Gwent, and that was a significant factor in our journey from 6.82 to the 5. I think I just want to talk about a bit of gearing in there. So the 5% increase is a £1.20 per month increase to the average band D. And if we think about gearing, if we went back to a further position beyond 5%, because 5% is £14.40, so if we went to say £10, so £10 increase would be 3.47%, not the 5, come down there. That saves the average band D 37 pence a month, loses policing £1 million. Think about that gearing on households. So I know it's stats and figures and maths, etc. But for 36 pence per month per household, that's £1 million out of the budget, on top of a whole of £2.5 million. That's a £3.5 million problem recurrently. So think about the flex, think about the gearing. The second point, absolutely hear what you're saying around the capital programme funding and the cessation of government grant. I can sit here and remember in 2014-15 we had £1.1 million a year off the Home Office to fund capital, and the fleet replacement programme flexes each year, but it never drops below £1.5 million. Next year's £2.5 million because of that cycle of fleet replacement, because of that investment in police officers. If we've got 205 new police officers and extra PCSOs and the police staff equivalent to go with that, the 1:3 ratio, we need the vehicles and the infrastructure to support them. So we need to look at how, with the complete cessation of government grant to fund capital, how do you fund it? And I think we need to be very careful that we split that capital programme into 2 distinct elements, long life and short life assets. We understand we have a significant ask and need and request for short life assets. I'm talking about ICT, and I'm talking about cars and vehicles and bikes and vans, etc., that have a life less than sort of 5 years. So it would be remiss of me as the financial advisor to be borrowing long term to fund that, because I'd still be paying off the loan by the time I'm on my 4th or 5th laptop or vehicle. You know, we replace our vehicles 5 years, 120,000 miles. Usually done the mileage before they get into date. So we need it's an honest moment. It's a revenue contribution to fund those short life assets, because I can't borrow for them. That would be financially a stupid thing to do. So I line up the borrowing with the estate element, the longer term assets, the things we're going to have for the next 100 years. So if you look at Appendix 8A, the revenue contribution to capital, the money I'm using at the revenue programme is basically funding short-term assets, ICT and fleet. The longer-term external borrowing bit that kicks in, touches 22, 23, but predominantly 23, 24, that's the piece we're going to wrap up in this review, the straight strategy, which the Commissioner has already talked about, which will commence at the start of the financial year. So I just want to draw that comparison. And then the third point, we just talked about the NI impact. So the 1.25 NI levy, 1.25% NI levy for health and social care costs us just over £750,000 next year. The government have wound that into the government grant they've given us next year. So we're having £5.2 million next year, completely written off for 82 officers and the NI increase. And the government made that assurance in the CSR. So if the NI increase, you've got to think, is it going to be deferred or cancelled? If it's cancelled, the government will just take that money back off us. They'll just say, well, you know, you haven't got that pressure, we'll have that, thank you very much. The likelihood is it'll be deferred. So the government got two choices then. They can take it back off us for 1 year. I doubt they'll do that. However, that produces only a non-recurrent surplus in 22-23 because the bill will manifest in 23-24. So it doesn't actually resolve the recurrent problem that we have. It'll just be a short-term timing difference. I've said this, is this my 10th year in front of the panel? Sometimes I'm feeling old now, but we always talk about the precept. When you reduce or increase the precept, you suffer the consequences or gain that benefit forever through the MTFP because it's a recurrent. The new base is the new base. So we've got to be very mindful of ever adjusting a precept increase for a non-recurrent surplus, because when that pressure kicks back in the second year, you do not have that base funding to address it. So hopefully that covers off your questions there, Councillor Mann.
Thank you.
It's both. It's the employer as well.
So the employer pays on that as well.
Councillor Easton, could you unmute your mic on Teams, please?
It's
Thank
on the employer. Yeah. Actually, there's contributions on your behalf. Yeah. So the question was the implications for the health and social care levy was thought to only apply to employees, but it's an employers because the employer also has a duty to fund NI as well on behalf of the employee.
Thank you. Question from myself through the Commissioner. Appendix 1B, page 103, refers to the 2021-22 actuals, showing a sum of 147 million as the expected outturn for 21-22, and it shows a budget requirement of 22-23 for 156 million. Okay, on page 119 then, which is Appendix 6. And thank you to Mark for the A3 sheets, they've made a huge difference. On the full year forecast here, you've got 138.6 million before transfers and 145 million including transfers. Is the expected outturn for 21-22 likely to be less than that illustrated on Appendix 1B on the 147 million? And if so, is there likely to be a surplus from 21-22 funding to contribute to 2022-23's position?
I'll pick that one up. Thank you for whoever put that question. So the medium-term financial plan, so Appendix 1B, shows the net revenue expenditure. And when I talk about net revenue expenditure, that's net revenue expenditure, that expenditure that is funded by government grant and precept. So 1B is a window just on government grant and precept. However, we also get specific grants and income from other sources. So that moves us to gross revenue expenditure. So Appendix 6 is the totality of the resource. That's the totality of the budget, including government grant, precept, other income, specific grants, special grants, and transfers in and out from reserves. So in short, Appendix 6 is the totality and shows the totality of that non-recurrent surplus that is going to be that's going to manifest in 21-22. That is non-recurrent because it manifests by virtue of the way government fund last year's PUP officers, because we get the government grant in one fell swoop. The profile of officers, we recruited 61 officers last year through PUP, but they don't all land April the 1st. Plus there's other movement in the establishment as we have leavers and starters. So we generally sometimes have a non-recurrent surplus. The benefit is that non-recurrent surplus will provide a non-recurrent contribution into the capital programme for next year, therefore delaying longer term borrowing a bit further into the future. So there is a slight recurrent benefit, but not within 22-23, because there'll be very minimal borrowing in 22-23, if at all. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. That's actually gone on to answer one of my further questions about explaining the reason for the 3 million underspend on police officer pay and allowances. So it's that timing and that I just wanted that explained for the purpose of the panel.
The PUP funding, so we had over £4 million of funding last year for government to pay for those police officers, 62, so the middle tranche of our 205, to pay for those police officers for the long to medium term. Because that's the government commitment, and I think that's an important piece, is the government are committed to funding 20,000 new officers across policing, not the local ratepayers. So that's the important bit.
I think it's worth pointing out.
Not the little dog that was sat on my lap while we were having our finance meeting who got in the way. Page 105 then, please. So Appendix 1C. Thank you for breaking down the net revenue expenditure for 21-22 for the panel to see the biggest areas. Obviously, one of the biggest areas is local policing at 41 million. Could you give a bit more of a breakdown for support functions? So there's 38.5 million for support functions. Could you give us a bit of a breakdown as to the largest elements of that expenditure?
Predominantly, that would be, I'm just having a little look now, predominantly that would be around estate ICT. So that's our contracts and services, basically. So we've got a lot of the pay elements, but you have a number of the ICT contracts, the running of the estate, the running of custody contracts, etc., multi-million. So what I've, just for the benefit of the other panel members, what I've assured the finance subgroup is we need to work on this appendix itself, because there's so many layers within there. So if you talk about sort of local policing, what's in there, what's response, what's neighbourhoods, dealing with the public, what's FCR, etc. And I think support service, support functions is one of the primary ones. You know, some of our training contracts, etc. So what I propose to do is to work with that finance group to draw out a better pictorial representation. The danger is it could end up being the totality of the appendices could be the explosion out of this one, because there's, for each of the, forgive me, how many separate headings are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 headings. Each of those has 10 subsets, at least, you know, around 10 subsets. So we could have 150 different ways of showing the budget. That said, however, I think it's important that you see those aspects. So support functions, again, picking up ICT, I would always say out the biggies, because there's lots of contracts in there. The biggies, ICT and state, probably around £5 to £6 million each.
Thank you very much. Final question for myself on the detail. On page 123, Appendix 8A, one of the things you've indicated as well already is about the level of spend and the level of investment that's needed in the information systems. And looking at future years, there's two huge areas. The 3F project on line 5, which is picking up over 4 million from 2022. 23 onwards, and the ESN project, the Emergency Services Network project. The Emergency Services Network project is something we've spoken about at the panel previously, and we know that's a huge investment needed from that. But could you explain a little bit about this? Is it the fixed flexible field project? If you could highlight a bit about that for us, so we can understand the level of spend and investment that's needed there.
So this is all part of the agile working and productivity sort of improvement piece for the force that we allocate. The Triple F stands for exactly fixed, flexible and field, allocating all officers and staff. You're either fixed at a desk, force control room, for example. You're flexible, the likes of me, I can pick up a laptop and go and work anyway, and field predominantly police officers and frontline police staff. So in order for them to be productive, reduce wastage and downtime, be very efficient, effective around working with partners, working with each other, they issued Samsung mobile devices and laptops and many of the laptops have their own SIM cards, so they can work from anywhere. So and this is a collaborative programme of work that we do with South Wales Police as well through our digital services division. So again, economies of scale in purchase, economies of scale in rollout, economies of scale in replenishment, etc., etc. So these are a phased cycle of delivery of laptops and the Samsung devices. You appreciate the finite life, 3 to 5 years for a device. So this is that rolling programme, and we see the huge benefits of officer and staff utilisation time that we see. You're not running back to stations to work on your laptop, etc. And I think the defining moment for me around this was March the 20th, 2020, when we went first lockdown, and Gwent Police, at a flick of a switch, didn't miss a beat. Did not miss a beat. We all just literally went flexible instantly. The technology was there. The proof of the investment was there, and the chief probably, there was a number of other forces scrabbling around trying to find laptops, outdated laptops, just so they could get through that. And we, at the flick of a switch, saw that benefit. So that the FFF programme, hugely successful, probably worthwhile thinking about to bring something to a future panel, perhaps, so you can see that technology at play and the benefits it brought to not only officers' utilisation time, staff utilisation time, well-being, but the communities of Gwent who see has less officers in stations updating logs, etc., more visible policing. So I think that's the important thing. And then ESN, for those members, this is the Home Office sponsored programme for transition from the outdated now airwave devices. So the conventional police radios you see that is based on sort of older technology, been in, oh goodness, 20, 30 years, a long time. And the Home Office and the 300 plus organisations that rely on that airwave system need to transition to a modern and sustainable communications platform. So ESN, Emergency Services Network, is a bespoke policing network built through partnership with policing and a commercial sector, and also the development of devices. So basically 300 different organisations will move to smartphone enabled data and voice communications. It's an £11 billion programme of work. It's incredibly difficult, but the transition costs are that you see their capital. That's about the purchase of devices. That's about interworking operability between control rooms and systems and forces. That's about dual running, because you can't just flick a switch overnight and there will be transitions. So there'll be forces and individuals still using the old style Tetra radios, we call them, but still using the local devices. So I lead on that on behalf of all CFOs in England and Wales from a commissioner's point of view. So heavily plugged into that programme, excuse the pun. But yeah, significant. And the big risk is at the programme level, there is the business case does demonstrate value for money. The programme will deliver, if not cashable savings, productivity savings, and importantly, it'll de-risk the current profile, because there are spots with the airway that the system doesn't work. It can fall down. It doesn't work down in the tube, that, when we saw the 7.7 bombs, etc. So it does de-risk that. The key questions are on the affordability piece. So the Gwent figure is about £6 million. We are a £6 million implementation piece. But we go back to the unavoidable piece. One force can't say I can't afford it. So you can't have 42 forces all using brand new Samsung devices and one force saying we couldn't afford to transition. So it's again this overwhelming pressure that we need to keep a pace of technological change. And it does link back into Councillor Mann's first question around how we fund that. And that's significant. And the fortunate piece with the ESN transition is we have an equivalent ESN transition reserve. So we will be one of the few forces who won't be borrowing to fund short life assets through the ESN. We have set aside that previously through, dare I say, robust financial management.
You can dare to say it, and I'm sure we'd all agree with you. But I think it's important around the ESN is that this is a government-led project. So whereas like the fixed flexible field project, you have control over that. You're able with South Wales Police to determine what our routes are, where we're going. The ESN is a completely different project, and it's something that we're keeping an eye on the Chair's panel, and I think as a panel we need to keep an eye on as well, certainly as it progresses, because there's been significant delays in the project, and significant delays bring extra costs, and extra costs for the force, whilst we're continuing and trying to limp along or buy new devices or whatever we need to do to get us to that point, rather than invest heavily in technology which we know is going to be replaced in a short lifetime. Okay, thank you very much. I've got one final question to wrap up with. Do any other members have any other questions? We will be going in to discuss this in a private space. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask them of the officers and the Commissioner before we go into that, if you've got any concerns.
Yeah.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Inflation, I was going to talk about. It's obviously we all consider the inflation problem that residents are facing, and an extra £1.20 a month adds to those inflationary pressures. But I believe that those inflationary pressures, I mean, everybody has their own individual inflationary pressure. The CPI is a broad spectrum, 700 different items. The poorer people in society tend to be hit harder with inflation. And when poverty is visited upon the residents, I believe that there's an increase in crime that goes hand in hand with it. So I suppose I'm asking you the question, how do you support the slight increase in inflation, which you will visit on the residents, of £1.20 a month, compared to the service pressures then, which will be put on you because of those outside factors?
If I could just start. If I could just start, and then Darren can come in on the more general issues of the impact of inflation. Look, we understand that absolutely. And I mentioned in response to an earlier question, we are aware of inflation. Okay, we're not in the situation that many people find themselves in, of just about managing or not managing, as the case may be, and their situation gets even worse. It is, of course, a very small amount when compared with, say, what the utility companies are talking about, with up to 50% increases in their costs going into from April, which are frightening levels of increase, really frightening for everyone. There is a link, we know, that in terms of financial disadvantage, when people are really up against it, it can lead to an increase in crime. Yes, it can do. And that is bad for everyone. The only way that, and this isn't just an issue for policing, of course, it's a societal issue, but it does mean that policing will be the first call of resource to assist to deal with those impacts, and we have to be as well resourced as we possibly can be. So the need to maintain the officer and staff numbers that I've referred to, for me, is paramount. Well, look, I'll just make those points very generally, and that, of course, has been one of the main motivations as to why we reduced the initial bid that we'd received, and as a result, and that's the reason why we have the surveys, so that we can have a reasonably scientific assessment of the impact on people and their ability to meet any increase. But I do take your point, and we don't do this recklessly in any way, but we are down to the bare minimum in terms of what we need to maintain an adequate policing force. Darren.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Morgan. Yeah, really insightful question there. I think I'll tackle it. So we're hit by inflation like the household. We've seen significant increase around our utility. we're seeing significant increase in construction sites. So we capital program back to the significant inflation aspect of COVID, by Brexit, driven by tanker getting caught in Suez many months ago. That all played in through, and we can manage some of them. Later get around. We see enough fuel. Think about our fleet and our ability to respond. And I think the way we manage it, I think the question is around homeowners don't have a choice to manage that 2020. It's a fait accompli. We do. Policing, Gwent Police delivered £52.7 million of efficiency savings since 2008-9. So our expenditure graph has done. We left our expenditure graph at 10, it does that, and our funding graph has done that. The gap would have been 57 million, 52.7 million pounds by today, but we've closed that gap year on year. So we've mitigated that inflation-wise by finding savings elsewhere. We talk about the investment in technology and productivity improvement, so we can get, deliver the same and better service with perhaps less input. Policing, if you compare inflation, our government grant as of today is 13% in real terms less than it was 12, 13 years ago. So we've absorbed that growth every year. And we never go into a precept setting round with precept being the magic bullet to balance the books. So we sit here today on top of £52.7 million worth of savings. We're going to deliver another £1.2 million worth of savings next year. And we've got an unbalanced budget of 2.5 million after that. So we've got to look closely then at, Chief, that 1.2 million you're going to save me next year. You couldn't make it, nearer 3.7, could you? Where do I cut my cloth to suit that? Where do I go? So we always look at, we have I'd hold it up as a best in class in Gwent, is the continuous improvement program. For those who've been around this long, it used to be called staying ahead program, to keep us staying ahead of the curve. Put in pre-austerity, put in pre-2010, just because we wanted to invest in a number of areas within the force, even when government grant was going up. We want to invest more. But then when austerity hit, we were one of the few forces who were able, again, I talk about the COVID implications on our technology kicking in. When austerity hit in 2010, we were able to expand that continuous improvement program, and we've delivered £52.7 million of cashable, real cashable efficiencies, not productivity improvements. They are tenfold that, but just cash out the system. So we have a very, very robust continuous improvement program with a really good program discipline. So we can tell you over the next 2 years the exact programs and areas of spend that will be scrutinized and gone through demand analysis, process mapping, what efficiency, productivity, what collaboration program can look like. It's hugely comprehensive. And that's how we continually are monitoring, not just as we get an increased cost, we don't pass it on directly to anybody else. The first port of call is, how can we save it? How can we absorb it? Etc. So the actual throughput onto the precept is always very, 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 very minimal, because we know that's the uncontrollable element that ends up at the feet of the people who can ill afford it most. And it's the single thing we wrestle with most acutely every year.
Yeah, I wonder if I could manage. My deputy, Larry Thomas, wants to make a point, but before I bring her in terms of Councillor Morgan's question, perhaps I should also mention that we do take slightly offbeat, but I think it's linked. We do take a very positive view about our commitment to helping those in greatest need, and we are. And this does complement certainly the crime prevention and the community cohesion aspects of the police and crime plan, where through quite separate funds, we get some money from the proceeds of crime fund, which we use then we've set up what we call the police community funds, about £300,000. And we use that deliberately, focusing on young people in some of our most financially disadvantaged areas, who could easily be in danger of slipping into a life of crime. And I think that's the link to what you're saying. And we provide financial resources, and I've visited many of them, and they're doing great work in every local authority in Gwent, where they actually engage with groups of young people by providing more positive activities, sometimes called diversionary activities, to actually try and do what we can, our contribution, to avoiding those young people drifting into a life of crime, because of all the damage that will do to them and society at large. So we try and take a very much positive approach, not just reacting to things, but being proactive and trying to stop it happening in the first place. So we do have that approach. With your permission, could I bring in a Larry?
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Councillor Morgan, for the question. I think it's absolutely the nub of what you will need to be considering in your deliberations. It's absolutely been at the heart of all of the scrutiny that we've put into the consideration being put forward before you today. That balance between the impact on residents, on people and families, and the impact on delivering a service to support those, to keep those families, those residents safe, and to enable the Chief Constable to facilitate the most effective policing service to support our communities and our residents and our families. And I really just want to reflect back to perhaps your opening remarks, Chair, that we all sat here in December listening to an exceptionally compelling case by the Chief Constable about her requirements for delivering that service over the next year. And what is presented today is an honest budget as a result of that scrutiny. It's really the end result of us really testing, checking, and it is presented with that honest approach. But it's presented also with that commitment that we will continue to tackle crime, that we will absolutely continue to support vulnerable people and the most vulnerable people. And I'm absolutely proud of the work that we've been doing on building innovative services to support our most vulnerable in our control room, our mental health practitioners. Those are services that we know are vital and that we need to continue delivering. That commitment, as the Commissioner has just said, to early intervention and prevention, that's what's going to support, that's the Gwent Police support to those families who will be feeling the financial challenges, making sure that we work in collaboration with our local authority and health partners and our third sector, in particular with young people and families, but for people across our communities. We recognise the uncertainty, and working in partnership, I think, is really important in how we deliver. And again, I would want to take you all back to the first question that the panel asked the Commissioner. This is set within an unprecedented backdrop of what we need to be delivering to keep our community safe. So let's just think about that question around violence against women and girls. And the absolute determination, I've said this to you before, the absolute determination of the Commissioner, myself, and the Chief Constable and her Chief Officer team that we are going to make a dramatic difference in terms of the experience of our violence against women and girls in our communities. And that starts within our organisation. And within that, we also know all of us are going to seek to have to address the challenge about the recovery from COVID. And we don't actually know what that is at the moment. We don't know what the impact of crime in real terms, in terms of COVID, the impact on young people, the impact on everyone's mental health and the support needs we will need to be providing. So I think it's really just to add my voice to Jeff and to Darren's to say, this is an honest request. It's what we believe, having wrestled with that dilemma, and not wishing to pass any penny more of a burden onto the residents of Gwent than we can absolutely avoid. But we also need to recognise that if we are to keep those residents, those families safe, protected and secure, this is the investment we need to be able to provide that service.
Thank you very much. That's actually just picked up on my next question, which was how can you assure us that you have a robust and realistic budget that you've brought to panel today? Do I have any further questions? I will now, yeah. Any further questions from the panel? Yeah, just a second, come in. Any further questions from the panel? No, okay. I was just checking. Councillor Easton, could you turn the mic on on Teams?
Good all wrong. Right, you're on. On your front sheet of the presentation, you're showing that we're doing about 100,000 miles a week per car, in police cars, which amounts to about 5 million a year. You've got over the next number of years, you've got to spend maybe 11-12 million pound on vehicle replacement, which to me is about your estimates of 125,000 miles each vehicle, maybe 40 a year. You also talk about flexibility with computer systems, laptop, and you made some comments. Flip back to the office. Are there savings in vehicle maintenance and vehicle costs related to use of computers?
Yes. So we saw a significant reduction in fleet over the last 10 years by about 25%. So we took 25% of our vehicles out because we had set utilization rates and we were investing in technology and thus reduced. But you still, that side, you still need people carriers, you still need the response vehicles, you still need the road policing vehicles, you still need the motorbikes, etc., etc., etc. Then we had the reinvestment in police officers and PCSOs and police staff. So the fleet establishment has gone back up. However, we still will be looking at significant fleet savings because we're implementing a telematics system. So into every vehicle, we will have a piece of technology that will say where it's been, what it's doing, what's being driven, like what's the utilization rate. Once we've got that information, we can then be a far better position to understand the utilization of our fleet, post-investment in ICT, post-investment in police officer uplift program. So we will get a very efficient fleet service. And it also, not just on buying vehicles and using vehicles, but also consequential costs of repairs and maintenance. So this telematics system, like you see with some of the, some of the insurance companies now will get you a discount of the telematics on your phone in the car. We will have that telematics system in our fleet. So we will have that far better intelligence of that utilization, and it is in the future continuous improvement program to deliver savings. I think from memory it's 100,000, but there we are. There we are.
About the estate strategy, you mentioned in your presentation some observations, what you're looking at for the estate strategy coming along.
Yes, I think I referred to the fact that we're going to review the estate strategy.
Right, yeah.
At the beginning of, well, within a few months, at the beginning of the new financial year. And we'll be looking at how it aligns with the needs of the force. But certainly our estate strategy remains fairly firm aim.
So on page 123, A, estate, that is going to fundamentally change or marginally change? Is it going to be more or less, or what do you see? Because you've got the Abergavenny hub going up at Llanfoes now. You've got other bodies being built. Where do you see the estate strategy? I'm on a estate strategy body. Where do you see the estate strategy going in the future? Is there any major changes to what you've got on page 123?
I think it's. I think it's fair to say that the strategy. Well, as I've said, there will be a review to see what the implications of this is and what we need to do going forward. Where there are clear agreements already in place, contracts signed, etc., and work underway, that will no doubt continue. But we will look at the rest of it, if you like. But we have no choice on this. We have to then review what the implications are for borrowing and affordability going forward. But certainly our estate strategy, the long-term aims are there.
Okay.
The best way I can put it is affordable. We need to be strategy, plan, we shared our rationale, the key pillars around operational policing, the public, the professional management sustainability piece. It's put on the board to ensure that the amount, the affordability of the programme over that 10-year, it's a 10-year programme, it's a 10-year period.
Yeah.
Have we got the phase right? Have we got the conceptual pieces right? Is it affordable? Do we need to look at it from an affordable point of view? Because we are exposing ourselves to, as Councillor says, 50 million pounds of borrowing over the next 10 years. We are probably, put my neck on the line, the only commissioner of falls probably in the UK with zero borrowing. Again, I'll say robust financial management. Utilisation of defensive reserves, so we have zero exposure. But before we cross that boundary, I need to be assured the commissioner, I need to assure the chief constable, I need to assure the public at Gwent that there's an absolute need for that investment, because we are triangulated every time the public need for assurance in the state, fundamental operational policing need, and professional point of view. I would say a lot of our estate is old. It doesn't embrace agile working. It's difficult to maintain. It's difficult to heat. All the new stuff is excellent. So there's savings in here. So let's not just look at the estate strategy and investment as money disappearing. There are significant cashable efficiencies in delivering a fit for purpose estate. So it's a put on the ball moment. We will engage the reference group. Why the panel to make sure that particularly the finance reference group and the estate reference group are joined together around the implications from a funding perspective, and we'll allow the next month or two to see commence it, I should say, to that up the ball.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Apologies, Chief Constable. I thought we were coming to the end of the questions, and I was going to invite you in to say, did you want to add any remarks? Did you want to respond to any of those? I know we've got Councillor Jenkins that wants a question. How do you want to take it?
Perhaps best for Councillor Jenkins first,
Yeah.
and then I'll just come in very briefly at the end, if I may, Chair.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much. I got to say that's very, very, very comprehensive, and I support the police 100%. But the problem we got is that I don't know about the other councillors around here, but as soon as any increase comes up, that's all we get is the keyboard warriors. Oh, the police don't do nothing for us. 101 takes so long, we don't even, you know what I mean? This is the thing we get. I had a gentleman come up to me the other day and said, look, I tried to phone and they get their car, for example, a murderer off his car. I said, well, phone 101, get a log for it. I said, then we can ask them for speed restrictions and such. I was on there for blah, 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 blah. Then you got it in the paper, then a councillor over this area somewhere was on the telephone for 22 minutes, is that right? Something like that. You know what I mean? And we don't see no police on patrol. The other thing we get is, well, I got outside my house, is speeding up and down, these young kids. I don't know what they got in their car today, but they turned something on. I don't know if you've all heard yet, it sounded like a machine gun. And then you heard it, and then they turn it off then, and it goes back to a normal car. Well, when I said to our local PC about it, and it's like they said, they haven't got the manpower to come out on there. You know what I mean? I said, you put a speeding van where I live on Vardical. They don't catch anybody. Everybody's on the road flashing their lights, putting it on Facebook. Hey, come a car on Vardical Road, what get everybody watching? Can we go back to where we put cameras where, or is that against the snowflakes now? But like I said, I agree with you, and I think if I had my way, I'd double the money to put in there, because we need more police. You do a damn good job. And in my day, I'm 72 years of age, we were terrified of the police. We would do anything to keep on the right side of the law. And if we didn't, we'd have a clipper on a year. But what I'm saying is that you get these keyboard warriors, and we're going to turn around now and say, yes, we got a little increase on the, to be honest, it's a small increase. It's not a packet of fags, is it? You know what I mean? And the people who complain there with all their rings and they've got all their tattoos down here. We've all seen it on there. I agree that
Right, Councillor, can you confirm the question you'd like to ask of the panel, please?
Yeah, no, the cuts you made was, as the cuts affected the 101, as it affected the police on patrol, as it affected the speed cameras.
Yes, okay, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm absolutely sure that, well, I am absolutely sure because, okay, yeah, I'm quite sure the chief will want to address a number of those points in her contribution now. Because it's a recommendation from our part. I have noted that you would double the money. But look, issues of contacting the police, and 101 is only one method of doing so, but it is for many people who don't have access to the internet for whatever reason. It is the most popular means of doing so. We are aware that the response rate time can vary, often depending upon the volume of calls. We know, for example, that Monday morning and during lunch times, the call volume is by far the highest, so it will take longer. But the average calls for 101 are improving. Every now and then, you will get a case where it's been an unacceptable length of time. They tend to be historic. I think the situation is a lot better than it is. What we will make sure that you have, which you can give then to those who have access to the internet, and many people do, is an internet address that is very easy to pass on information to Gwent Police, and there's also Facebook and Twitter as well. And indeed, on the 101 system that we have, there is a facility where you can press one of the buttons and get a call back rather than you just wait on there. But I accept that people want, of course they do, they want to talk to somebody and to be able to relay that intelligence, whatever it may be, to someone in the control room so it can be acted upon. Bear in mind 101 is a non-emergency number. I've met a lot of people who've described incidents to me that clearly were either very dangerous or actually were a crime in action and should have been a 999 call where there's an immediate response. So yeah, we don't anticipate that what we're asking for now, the reduced amount, will impact negatively on 101. It's an issue. The whole issue of contact with Gwent Police is very, very important for us. It's something that we do dip sample and monitor on a regular basis to see what levels of performance are. And I will talk with the Chief Constable about these issues as they arise. So please reassure people that if they know something is wrong, it is very, very important that they pass that intelligence on, because if we don't get it, then of course we can't do anything about it. And you know, I hear the points you make about speeding and then people warning each other so they don't speed and don't get caught. Well, if that slows them down and stops the danger to life and limb, okay. But perhaps I'll leave it there, and with your permission, perhaps you could bring in the chief.
Yes, did you have a final point, or did you want to wrap up?
Sorry,
Chief Constable.
on the question of 101 reporting, I have in fact directly reported a number of complaints that I've had, and in fact we did have some people from the panel visited the control room a while back, and I think we all had the people that we could report to, and I have had, let's say, reasonable explanations of most of the complaints I put in, but it is true that unfortunately at times people do wait a long time, and some people abandon calls because of the time they're waiting. But I think to actually contact the control room directly, and we can circulate the people to contact if necessary. At least it gives the control room a chance to look at the particular situation and see if there's anything that has gone wrong in that particular situation.
Thank you very much. So to wrap up, so we've wrapped up all our questions for today. So hand back over to the Chief Constable if she'd like to make any comments in terms of what you've heard today, and any comments. So should the panel come back with any requests for further savings or anything like that, you know, what impact you think it would have on the force, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, panel members. First of all, to members of the community that might be listening, my apologies, the camera on isn't working, but I just can confirm that I am in the room for those that are listening. Just first of all, in terms of the most recent comments around 101, we absolutely listen to people's frustrations, but in front of me I have the data from December of last year. I've been through a lot of data with the panel during the previous presentation. I'm not going to go into that, but just for last month, we had 7,260 calls. For that's 999. 101, we had new incidents, 7,324. So, and most of those were answered within 1 minute. Some of them were answered in 3 minutes, depending on the 999 demand at the time. So in all honesty, it's frustrating that I know members of the public expect an immediate response, but for 101, that's not the real world. For 999, absolutely, we'll be receiving a call within minutes. And not only receiving a call, we will have people deployed to the call. I mentioned previously about some of the demand placed on us because ambulance services are unable to attend. And very often, if life is at risk, that then comes to the police. And we will always attend where people's lives are at risk in our communities. So there's a whole narrative here, which I know is a frustration to the public, but also I think it's incumbent upon all of us to explain some of the demand that we're dealing with. So totally understand your frustrations. 999 calls will always be received, will always be dealt with, and we will always deal with life at risk, and we will do our very best to pick up our 101 calls, which are generally within 3 and 6 minutes, unless we have peak demand around 999. Just in terms of the estate strategy, and I've really enjoyed listening to the conversations today, because obviously I've contributed to them over recent panels. I think the one word that is missing is about operational need for the estate as well. So as you know, as part of our estate strategy, there is a joint firearms unit, and also some plans that we have in terms of developing what we believe is a requirement for a custody hub in this area. Custody is a central part of the infrastructure of the police service. It's the only way that we can detain people is if we take them into custody. And our primary custody in Newport has a short-lived lifespan. It's only probably going to last us another 4 or 5 years. So we need to plan for the future now. In terms of the Joint Firearms Unit, as you know, that's not a Gwent only build. That is a shared endeavour with Dyfed-Powys and South Wales Police. And that is to equip our firearms officers in a location with the training they need to save life. So it's not just bricks and mortar. These are buildings that are an operational need that over the next certainly 4 to 8 months, 8 years, I wish it was 8 months, 4 to 8 years, we need to be delivering on this, which is why it's a 10-year strategy that we have to work towards in order for us to be able to deliver those operational needs. They're not just bricks and mortar. And I think that's really important that I mention that at this juncture. And then lastly, before you deliberate and have the time to consider what's being presented by the Commissioner, we've talked about numbers and money, quite rightly so. And we've talked about lots of national projects and local projects that we're trying to deliver, technology, vehicles. The most important thing that I can do for the people of Gwent is to deliver the policing service, to deal with firearms incidents, child abuse, sexual assault, rape, assaults on individuals, public order events, everything from speeding right through to murders. And I would remind you that we have 2 murder trials ongoing at this moment in time in relation to offences committed here in Gwent. And so for me to be able to deliver a service, I already, even from the bid that's been presented today, we have a £2.5 million shortfall. even with the bid that's presented today, 2.5 million to find. Anything less that the Commissioner asks me to deliver with will mean looking at how we deliver the service to the public. And so all I would ask of you is, I understand sometimes the public views. I understand sometimes the negative response that you get. But actually there's an awful lot of positive response that people don't often bring to your attention. 2 years ago, our victim satisfaction rates were around 46%. The most recent data is telling us that victims of crime are satisfied with Gwent Police up in the 82 and 84% bracket. You know, between 70 and 80% of people are happy with the service that we provide. We've still got plenty of work to do, and I'm not complacent, but I can only do that with a budget that is workable. And it is an honest budget that's been presented, but from my perspective, as your Chief Constable, it is a challenging budget for me to deliver on. So I just want to really make sure that you understand that, because it is hard to deliver a service when you haven't got the money and the resource to do it, against a backdrop where public expectations are very high. So I would just ask you, please, to consider it as an honest budget, but also a very challenging one that I will be expected to deliver against. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That brings the agenda item to a close in terms of the discussion as a group. We will now invite the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable to leave the room while we carry out our personal deliberation. To do that, what we will need to do is make sure that the meeting will continue, but it will continue in this room. So we need to make sure that all the microphones are on silent on Teams, so that we will be officially adjourned and it will be a private part of the meeting. So thank you to yourselves if you'd like to leave the room when it's convenient, and if everybody can ensure that their microphones are turned off on, and cameras and microphones are turned off on Teams, please. So we recommend the meeting and we welcome the officers from the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable back into the room with the members. After an open and frank discussion around the bid that's been received today, the panel note the bid was reduced from 6.8% to 5% based upon the extra grant funding to offset the NI increase, and the office is funded through Operation Uplift and the other associated factors covered in your presentation. The panel do, however, remain to have concerns about the capital programme and the future cost of borrowing. It's something that's had some discussion today and something which we continue to monitor. We've raised our concerns, and hopefully through the estates panel and through the finance panels, we can look to take that forward. However, in saying that, the panel very much fully support the work of Gwent Police, and we recognise the ongoing pressures that you are under to actually deliver that service effectively. And that's the pressure for yourself, Chief Constable, and for your staff, clearly. There's a value to communities which safety and assurance delivered by Gwent Police, they just cannot be quantified in monetary terms. In view of the concerns of the panel and the pressures and the funding situation, the view of the panel is that we wish to veto the 5%, which we consider to be below the recommended needed, and we recommend a revised precept of 5.5% to be used to mitigate the 2.5 million shortfall that you've drawn to our attention today. That's the view of the panel. Can I have some... to agree that, can I have somebody to move that view, please? Somebody to second, and all those in support, please. Okay. Just keep your hands up. Keep your hands up a second so we can...
Don't fall off your chair, Dan.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so that concludes our discussion on that item. Commissioner, Chief Constable, would you like to make any comment in response to that?
Thank you. Not usually, as a politician, lost for words, but I'm very grateful for the consideration that you've given to us, and that the case that we've put forward has been recognised, and for the obviously lengthy discussion that you had to deliberate on it, and the considerations that you've given and the support that you are showing both to myself and to the Chief Constable at this time. And we're very grateful for that. I assume we'll have the usual letter laying out the points that you've made, Chair, and then we shall go forward, and we will obviously look at our plans now in the light of this discussion, and keep you informed of what we intend to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know what to say, in all honesty. I'm absolutely hugely grateful on behalf of all of the officers and staff that are out there to this half in the morning trying to keep people safe. This message will mean an awful lot to them at a time when nationally policing is very much having a hard time. But of course that thanks comes with that continued commitment to do the very best that we can to serve our communities even better, because it is all about making sure that we continuously improve that performance for our communities. And I know that the communities of Gwent deserve the very best. So, diolch yn fawr iawn. We are hugely grateful for the support and the impact of your decision will have, enormous benefits for the communities of Gwent, and will be a huge morale boost for the officers and staff who are out there doing their very best for us. Thank you.
Thank you. So the mechanics of this now is that we will produce a letter confirming the recommendation from today. You will then need to provide a report back to us, Commissioner, by the 15th of February in response to that. And as a panel, then we will need to reconvene by the 22nd of September, 22nd of February, to agree that. So Kath will put that in place for us, and obviously there's quite short time frames, but I'm sure we can work within those to resolve that issue. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the final agenda item 6, the forward work programme, and I'll hand over to Kath on this one.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to identify to members, if you look on the final page of your document pack, the next meeting of the panel is on the 25th of March, barring the reconvened preset meeting. We have planned for the PCC update, the performance framework Q3, which we discussed at the last meeting, which will be the new performance framework. And we've also suggested one of the items that were on date to be confirmed on crime prevention. The meeting after that will be the 1st of July, which is the annual meeting. I'm aware, of course, we've got local authority meetings in May. That will require me to contact local authorities regarding the membership of the panel, because, of course, depending on the political and geographical balance of after the elections, the panel may have to change. So just be advised that March could well be some of yours. It could be your last meeting, sadly. We've got a number of items or dates to be confirmed, which I'm just in discussion with the Chief Constable in the Commissioner's office on. And one of the suggestions was possibly having a briefing on estate strategy. And I know I'll look at a possible date for members going forward.
Thank you very much, Carol. Did any members have... Oh, Councillor Mann, did you want to come in on that point? Or was your hand up?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Chair. Thanks.
Sorry, if I heard correctly, we have got to meet, which seems strange because we're making a special order going up rather than down. But if we are going to meet rather than just a very short meeting, I assume we've got a person. Should we then use that meeting on the premises as well? It's a long way for people to come for a very short meeting.
I can look at the dates obviously in the calendar, but we are set by statute in terms of when we must respond by.
For example, as possible, whether panel can hear more about the state.
Yeah. I mean, I'll negotiate with the Commissioner's office and see if we have the formal meeting, and then we can adjourn for any briefings that you might want. Okay.
Okay, so that brings that item to a close. That's the end of the agenda, so I would like to thank everybody very much for their enthusiasm, their interest, their discussion and their support on today's agenda items. Wish everybody well, and the next panel meeting is a date to be confirmed in February, and the next formal meeting after that is in March, 25th of March. So take care, everybody. Thank you very much. That's the end of the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.